Even though the end of the year is quickly approaching, the lame duck session of Congress is proving to be a very productive one. A couple of major pieces of legislation cleared the House on Thursday, and KXAN's Will Dupree joins us now live for an interview with the Texas Congressman. Will.
Thanks so much, Jen. This afternoon we have Representative August Pfluger in our studio. He's a Republican who represents the sprawling District 11, which includes parts of our viewing area like Llano. Congressman, thank you so much for being here and taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Will.
On Thursday, you were in D.C. and the House approved sweeping legislation that would authorize $858 billion in national defense funding. Many consider this to be a must-pass bill, and Republicans worked in rescinding the military's COVID vaccine mandate. And I'm wondering if that's part of the strategy, something like that, when Republicans take power in the House, but they are in a divided Congress next year, to get some of their priorities through.
You know, it was a win. It's a win for America. It's a win for national security. And I'd say less of the strategy on which party has power and more on focusing on national defense issues. And for Austin, for the Army's Future Command that is here, for bases like Fort Hood that I represent coming January, it really is focusing on national security issues. And I think what Republicans and in a bipartisan way, Democrats have done is we've moved the chaff away, we've focused on what's important, and we're going to focus on the threats so that our warfighters are ready for the next, whatever the next threat may be.
After the election, I had a chance to talk to Congressman McCall about what the future of assistance to Ukraine looked like. I'm wondering, in your opinion, how much more help should the U.S. provide there?
You know, I think the first step is, and I've worked with Michael McCall on this very closely, is we want to know how effective the systems, the money, the aid that has been sent there so far, and I've supported it. But we want to see how effective that is. What's the accountability of that? We're asking the White House for that. And that's step one. And then as we get into step 2 and 3, you know, we can determine what's helpful and what's not. But the American taxpayer deserves to have accountability of what's being sent overseas.
Okay, so just to clarify, you would potentially like to see more assistance go to Ukraine?
The first step is really to see how effective the aid has been and get an accounting of that. That's what we're asking the White House. And I think Democrats want that as well. You know, I do believe that we're in a situation right now with $31+ trillion of debt that we have to be very careful about where we're spending money anywhere. Get that accounting, let the taxpayers know, get the feedback, and then make decisions after that.
We mentioned the defense bill being passed yesterday. The House also passed the Respect for Marriage Act, which extends some protections to same-sex and interracial marriages. I only know one member of the Texas Republican delegation in the House voted in favor of it. You joined 22 others in opposing it. I'm wondering what made you vote against that measure?
Well, when you look back at the Obergefell decision, it was pretty clear, and this was the law of the land. And I think it's important to say that Republicans aren't trying to nullify any sort of marriage. I think instead, it seems to be overreach on religious liberty while also claiming to protect religious liberties. But those who have sincerely held beliefs, they needed some protection. I think those amendments presented in the Senate specifically were turned down. And that's, I know, one reason why many people voted against it.
Okay, so the amendments that were included were not enough to sway you to vote in favor of it.
Exactly. And you know, I'll say this too, this was something for the courts. The Supreme Court made this decision. It was pretty clear, and state by state, which I'm a big proponent of states making their own decisions, those protections were in place. I think it was duplicitous to have an additional piece of legislation come to the House floor.
Even though the Supreme Court's potential concurring opinion from Clarence Thomas on Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health led the door open to that possibly being overturned.
You know, I think that was the argument, and when you really look at the details of this particular one, many of those facts don't line up with any inclination for the courts to overturn Obergefell decision, and there was no indication that that was going to be done or could be done, and we appreciate religious liberty. The First Amendment is so important. I hope you'll follow some of my work on the First Amendment with big tech in you know, today's news as we look at that. But this one, in my opinion, and the reason that I voted against it was because it seemed to then infringe upon adoption agencies and other religious, you know, those who had those sincerely held religious beliefs, that their tax status could be taken away if they disagreed with this, which is a juxtaposition of the two ideas here.
Okay, well, I want to ask you one more thing before
Sure.
we let you go. We want to look ahead to the next Congress, and your party obviously has laid out that the border will be one of those priorities in the next session. I'm wondering, with the other Republicans that joined you yesterday in unveiling this four-part plan to, in your words, secure the border, how much of what you pitched yesterday is new, or is it more of an assurance that this will be top of mind for the voters out there?
It's a great question. Many of the ideas, many of the pieces of legislation are not new. In fact, I had a piece of legislation related to border security that passed yesterday in the defense bill. I think the big picture is that we need to focus on this. It's hurting Texans. This is not a political issue. It should not be a political issue. You know, even walking into this studio, it was said, well, we don't just let anybody in, and that's good. That's for safety reasons. And I think when you look at the 53 people who died in that tractor trailer in July, south of San Antonio, that was completely avoidable. The 100,000+ fentanyl deaths. We are going to continue to highlight where our security is falling short, and we believe it's falling short in a massive way. It shouldn't be a political issue. All Texans care about this, regardless of political leanings. This really is about law and order and safety and security. I'm proud to serve as the ranking member on the Intelligence and Counterterrorism subcommittee, and will continue to make sure that our country is safe while we still respect all humans, but we respect the law and order of the land.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. We have so much more to talk about. We appreciate you taking the time this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much.